A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I had the opportunity to sit down with Matt McRae. Matt is the owner and director of Three Brothers Flooring, which is a multi-generation timber flooring company. Matt is a genuine family man at heart, and on this week's episode, Matt explains just how important it is for him to listen to the client's expectations. Plus, you'll hear how growing up being the eldest of 5 siblings shaped him and his business today. Matt and his 3 younger brothers are all timber flooring guys and mastered the craft from their hard-working father. This was a really genuine sit-down conversation, so let's get into it. Madison McRae from Three Brothers Flooring Company, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm back in Newcastle this week talking to Matt, and before we hear about your timber flooring company, as always with our guests, we'd like to take it back to the start. So whereabouts did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up here locally, Lake Boy, around Lake Macquarie mainly, but we're a beach-going family. Anything to do with water, we're there. Also had a boat as well. Dad always had a boat growing up, so water was always in the blood. The surf was in the blood, and yeah, pretty typical growing up here in Newcastle. Big family, one of 5, oldest of 5. Dad was a working class man with his own business. He's been going for a while now. I think he's about 30 years in Newcastle.
Now, your dad, Ian, he's in the business of timber flooring as well?
He is, that's right. He's, growing up, he was a very hard-working guy, a real good example for us as kids. Worked hard, but always had time for us as kids. He always made sure that he was home at a reasonable time, so that cricket, anything to do with the ball as well. It's, you know, whether it was waves or a ball, we were there. So cricket in the backyard as kids was just a staple afternoon for us. And his flooring company's been going for 30 years now.
Okay, well that would have been, I guess, a lot of fun growing up in a big family with 4 other siblings. I'd imagine the house would have been extremely busy.
Busy all the time, yep.
Something would have been going on all the time.
Yeah, all the time. Mum and Dad built their second house just locally here in Warners Bay, and it was a big house to accommodate a big family, and it was fantastic. But of course, big yard, and we're always in the backyard in the pool.
And so being the eldest of 5, I'd imagine, were you one of the first to help out with your dad's family business?
Exactly. I was on site on school holidays all the time, hammer and punch in hand, on my hands and knees, blisters on my knees, splinters, the whole shebang. Yeah, that was my childhood. The business was always part of the family. That's just how we grew up. It was just hand in hand with family life.
So having your father in the business of timber flooring, were you always destined to get into the same profession, or were you thinking about other opportunities?
I was never groomed into floors, into timber. I think I just developed a love for being there with Dad, working with my hands when I wasn't at home. Like I liked being out and being with Dad. Dad and I are best mates. We always have been. And I think that's just, being on site with him was fantastic. I just loved being out.
That's a very special relationship, to have that bond, to be able to work with your dad. So I guess that started that, introduction into your particular craft of timber flooring. But do you think your father intentionally didn't really push you down into that path? Like, did he keep it open just because he thought, that was the right thing to do?
Yeah, he always kept it open. And I think I made a pretty good decision, an educated decision, that I was going to leave school early and go and start a trade and get into it. I'd seen the life that my dad had created, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted the house, I wanted the family, and timber floors, from what I could see, Dad's profession was like, it's pretty good. Like it's not just slapping paint on a wall or turning up in a 9-to-5 job. Like, this is a craft that I really wanted to get into, and I really enjoyed seeing the finished product as well. Like, being a kid and seeing the terrible condition that a floor may be in some of the older houses, and seeing the finished product was, your eyes would light up, and I just wanted to be a part of it. And at that time, Dad had quite a few guys with him. He was running a couple of teams, and I loved being around all the boys, and they treated me pretty good. And I was always with Dad, but just being around them was awesome. I liked the association with them. So, yeah, I just loved it.
Now, as always, I was looking through an Instagram post that your Instagram account, which is Three Brothers Flooring, put up, and there was an interesting post about your reflection on your trade and growing up. So do you want to explain to our listeners a little bit about the motivation behind that particular post?
Must have been feeling sentimental that day. Going on what I was saying earlier, I think, this is a trade that is different. A lot of people don't think of it as a trade. Dad really Dad has good ethics and a great work ethic. And I saw that and I wanted to replicate it. And he gave me everything that I could have been given to start a business, a massive leg up, an amazing mentor. And he showed me everything from the craft, the work, how to use each tool individually, but how to spend money, save money, a bit on marketing, just how to deal with the client and to make good business relationships. I remember going back to when I was a kid during school holidays. I'd be in the van, Dad would be on a quote, and he would be in there for like an hour, and I'd just be waiting to get home. And he'd come in, and I'd say, what? He'd come back in the van. I'd say, what's going on? Can we just go home? It's dark already. And he would always just say, it's PR, man, just getting to know the client, building that relationship, that business relationship, and that stuck with me. And that's something that I really wanted to carry forward into my business. And I see, like in other floor sanders locally, it's just it can just be a trade. You can just rock up, do your job, get paid, and go home. I didn't want that to be for my business. I wanted to be part of the project. I didn't want to come in 3 days and go home and go, got my money. I wanted it. I wanted to put my name on it and go and do what Dad did and be driving down the street and say, I worked on that place and you should see the floors in there. It's incredible. That's what I wanted to do with my kids. I wanted to, especially in Newcastle, we have so many iconic buildings and structures and houses that, being a small town, you see it all. And, know Newcastle like the back of my hand. And I know all the jobs that I've worked on. And I know all the jobs Dad has worked on. And I love being attached to those places and being attached to Newcastle in that sense, because these are floors that, this is our work that people walk on for generations. Their families grow up on these floors. They enjoy it. It's part of their home. It's not just a paint colour. It's a craft, and I really like that part of the business and that side of it, being involved with the client.
And going back to what you said with your father and having that early conversation and that early engagement with the client, I'd imagine with your craft being timber flooring, unless you have that architect specifying particular product or particular finish, it's important for you to have that early relationship and get in with the client at that early stage so that they can talk to you about it.
Definitely. You need to know what the client wants and what they envision. And a lot of the times it can sometimes be an afterthought, the floor. Paint colours get chosen before the floor gets chosen usually. It's they don't know how to show me what they want. It's hard to just jump on Google and to do an image search and go, that's what I want. You got to understand the needs of the client. So with the finish, and you got to work in with their budget as well. So having just that half hour, sometimes it's only 10 minutes, but you just got to have that communication, and you can walk away from the quote and go, I know exactly what they want, or I have a good scope of what they want. I got a good idea, and I know the budget they're going to work in with, so that I know that this is the quote I'm going to put forward and this is the product I'm going to recommend, and I'll put my 2 cents in. With floors, there's a limit to what you can do with them. We do our best. We can change colours, we can stain, whitewash, and so forth. But depending on the timber the client has chosen, they might not know what can be done. So I like to put my 2 cents in, and we'll even discuss paint colours, and we'll go through and have a look at what the designer, the architects specified, and what they've brought out, and we'll go, well, you've got this floor, this is what we can do with it. I think this is going to work really nice with your cabinetry or your wall colour, your fireplace, centerpiece, something like that. So yeah, that first half hour is always crucial in these finishing trades, because it's something you see at the end.
Definitely. All right, Matt, so you began working for your father in his family business, and I presume you did some sort of apprenticeship for that?
Left school as soon as I could, and that was in 2009, and I started an apprenticeship with Dad. So yep, timber flooring has an apprenticeship that runs for 4 years. So I did that for 4 years. At that time, Dad had dropped off the guys that are working for him. A few of them went on to start their own businesses here in Newcastle. A few others left, and it just went down to me and him. So he simplified, and it was just us. I did my apprenticeship, finished my apprenticeship, and stayed on for another 2 years and ran a second team. At that point, I had my younger brother Hayden just below me. He started his apprenticeship, and then towards the end of my stint with Dad, Jackson, next brother down, started his apprenticeship with Dad as well. And 2015, I got married, and Dad had always encouraged me to go out on my own. I was already running the second team and in the second van. And so, yeah, in 2015, July 1st, Three Brothers was born.
Right. So, and out of curiosity, you said you had 4 other siblings. Are there any other siblings that are in the business as well?
So, yeah, I mentioned Hayden. Hayden's the next one down. Jackson, and then Lachlan has just finished his apprenticeship. And, yeah, then Montana's still at school. So we're all 4 of us.
Four brothers in the family business.
That's it.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, so you decided to go out on your own and establish Three Brothers Flooring. What was the process with that? How did that work out?
I basically got that second van and bought that off Dad with the machinery. And, yeah, no real experience in starting up a business, obviously. It was daunting, and I always had Dad in my ear as a mentor to help me through the rough times, but it really took off. I was at that point definitely competitive in pricing and just trying to get my foot in the door. But that soon changed. I was doing my own advertising, my own marketing. I did everything myself. I designed the website. I started the social media pipes. Everything was me. I made our T-shirts. I made the hats. There's one sitting right here. It was all me, and it was good because it kept costs down. It was just me at that point, and I had the dream was to have the 3 of us working together eventually. But we did a swapsy with Dad. I'd have the boys for half the week, and he'd have them for the rest of the week, which worked in good for me as starting my own business. Part of it was flexibility, and I didn't want to be working full time straight up. So I was working 3 to 4 days a week and still knocking over 1 to 2 jobs. And I'd only have one of the boys for a couple of those days. And yeah, it took off. We were starting off just with Google advertising, and we were just doing good work, and we just got referred. And being Newcastle, word of mouth plays a huge part with our business.
And I guess to go back a few steps, you already mentioned that you were running that second crew of guys going to jobs for your dad. So did you sit down with your dad and have a discussion and say, Dad, look, I really want to do this myself? Or how did that play out?
Yeah, as I said, he always obviously was capable of running that second team, but I didn't have a lot to do with the client. That was always Dad. And that was probably my biggest fear, was rocking up for quotes and just meeting people face to face, not knowing them from a bar of soap. And he helped me a lot with that. When I approached him about it, I don't know if he was surprised or not, because he was wanting me to go out on my own. I think he was probably proud that I finally bit the bullet and went, I think it's time. I think he could see that I was becoming my own man at that point. Obviously, I was married.
Which is great. And I mean, he was obviously encouraging you to take that step.
There was no, when I tell people this story, which is usually on every first quote, every meeting with a client, they always ask, okay, tell me about Three Brothers. And it's always a talking point. And some people think that, just come to the conclusion that, mustn't have seen eye to eye. But it was completely the opposite. We did see eye to eye. We wanted to just do the best we could. The work was there. So there's plenty of work in Newcastle. And I think, with my desire to move out and start this new venture, he was pretty proud.
And I think it's quite clever and strategic in that if he has extra work on and you have a bit of a quiet spot, or a builder stuffs you around and you can't get on the job site, you could actually share the brothers amongst the two of you.
It is extremely helpful. Having subbies is awesome. Dad always told me that I could always fall back on him, which was a huge relief. I could always go back. But I think I was pretty determined to just stick it out. And I think that was part of the drive of chasing clients. And that's where I learned how to chase clients and find new work in the beginning when I was trying to get my foot in the door.
Isn't it interesting that that's part of the motivation, and it's almost the thrill of the chase, isn't it, as
Definitely.
They say?
Yeah, for sure.
Of going out there and getting the job.
Chasing leads.
That's probably one of the most exciting parts of actually your trade or any particular trade in the construction industry, of meeting the client, trying to meet their needs, get on with them, gel, make sure you're the right fit equally on both sides. That is, you're judging them, they're judging you. And if the mold's right, you get that job. It's such a great feeling, isn't it?
It is. And, the builders that I did chase up originally when I first started the business, I'd seen their work and went and just shot emails, made phone calls, said, please give us a chance, let us work with you. We've just started out. We would love to work with you. Still work for those guys now, and it's awesome. And they've been there since the beginning. And the fact that we can hold those business relationships for so long in a finishing trade it means a lot to me, because it means that we're doing consistent work. So I'm really proud of that.
Oh, for sure. And that's part of the theme of Build Hatch, and the theme of this podcast is, just like you spoke about, building that community, building that circle of trusted advisors, people that are in this community, so that when you're going forward and looking for more work, or a builder gets a job, he actually takes his trades with him. Or the same with an architect. You do a great job for an architect or a designer, you get taken along onto that journey with them.
Definitely. And that was a big goal for me when I started the business. I wanted to be repeat clients. I wanted to be working with the best builders that Newcastle had to offer. And I still chase builders that I want to work for. And I don't think there's any problem with that. What we offer is, good quality and being consistent, being great with our timing. I think that's really important. And I think there's nothing wrong with chasing clients and chasing builders. I think it's great. And I'm sure there's a few builders in Newcastle that may or may not listen to this. They're like, oh yeah, he's hit me up a couple of times, maybe in the future. I think it's good.
It's good energy. It's about chasing work and being proactive on the front foot, as opposed to waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah, and repeat clients to me that's my goal, is repeat clients, because I know what I'm getting into with the builders that I work for, and it's consistent work, consistently great homes, and it's different from just your average residential refurbs.
Now, what's your favourite type of timber floor?
I get asked this question a lot, and I always give them the same answer. It depends on the house. Different timber works in different types of houses. every floor is different. That's why I don't carry samples. A lot of people expect samples when I rock up. Every floor is different. We're sitting on a cypress floor right now, and these houses in this street, probably pretty similar, but they're all different. They react differently to coating and to sanding. But yeah, I couldn't give you a timber, unfortunately.
Okay, Matt. So how do you differentiate yourself from your competitors in your industry?
Just touching back on what I was saying earlier with having a consistent finish, we have some really good machinery. I've done my best to not only learn how to do this job well, but our machinery is top notch. It's well tuned and we know how to use it. Our timing, there's only 2 jobs I can tell you that we went overtime on the job. So if we say we're going to do it in this amount of time, it's going to be done. You can be assured that we're not going to, if the surf's good, we're not going to be out in the surf. Your floor will be priority, and your schedule will be on track when we're done. And communication is huge. Going back to just meeting the client for the first time, knowing their needs, being upfront about, potential issues we may have with the job, rather than, that we might run into an issue and then down, at the end of the job we go, we don't say, this happened because, I didn't tell you, but you've got an issue in this area. It might be a stain or something that I knew we were never going to get out. We always got to make sure that the client has the right expectation for when the job's done.
Now, you mentioned tools, and coming from the industry, I know enough about timber flooring equipment. It's very expensive. So what's that process like in terms of outlaying money for expensive tools and equipment within your industry?
We like to definitely be up to date with our machinery. It can be pretty expensive, but I was very lucky that I was able to grab that set of machinery off Dad. But the outlay is pretty hefty for someone who's getting into the industry. If you're starting out, you probably could get away with a second-hand machine, but you got to know your machine, how it works, its flaws, so that you can rectify them down the track. No machine's perfect, but the machinery we work with, we've tested and tried a lot of different machinery, and they're just consistent. So,
how much of your work is new construction as opposed to coming in and renovating someone's existing floor?
I'd say that it's about 20% new and 80% existing residential.
So isn't it pleasing today to hear that there's so many people that are, I guess, ripping up carpet and going back to timber floorboards?
It's awesome. We're in a time period in Newcastle where that is happening a lot, and it's awesome. I mean, I don't like it because we get a lot of rough floors and a lot of rough jobs, but we have a lot of exciting projects that they've ripped up the carpets and they're trash, and we bring them to life. And it's such a fantastic product for families. It's a sustainable product as well. It's awesome if it's already there. Sustainable if you're putting it down, and that really means a lot to me. And it goes back to being part of Newcastle's history. Work on some incredible floors and the history behind them. When you pull the carpets up, they may have been carpeted for 50 years, and you pull them up and they've all got a story to tell. May have markings in them, engravings, bit of writing.
What's the most interesting thing you've discovered pulling up carpet and seeing what's underneath the floors?
There's a job in Glebe Road where I'm pretty sure that there was writing written in blood of 2 perhaps lovers. It was pretty intense. Don't know if it was blood. It looked pretty close.
Was there any money in there? Or
no, I've never found money. I'm waiting for that day still, where I've heard stories of the skirting popping off and guys finding money, but I haven't come across this day yet. But look, we find coins that are centuries old, and I think that's pretty cool.
I'd imagine with your particular business, do you work out like a square metre rate that you can measure how effective you've worked on that particular day, like a certain amount of square metres per day or per hour?
Our jobs usually aren't that big enough that we're noting what we're ripping through in a day, unless it's a big commercial job. But for your typical residential project, it is a square metre rate, unless it's extremely small. And
so you basically work out, you walk into a job or you look at a plan and say there's so many hours at this particular job.
Yeah, that's right. It's basically the amount of prep work. So if we're talking about an existing residential, any repairs, we've got to punch and fill any staples, nail holes that are around, so the man hours that are involved in that, and also level sanding, making sure it's dead flat. Obviously we can't level to the extent if there's a pier out or a beam out, a joist out, but yeah, it's the sanding, the prep work, and I think that's similar to what you'd kind of quote if you were painting, the amount of prep work that you put into it and the amount of man hours that are put into it.
And that's part of the key to your end result, isn't it, really? Making sure that preparation's carried out.
Yep. If the prep's not there, you'll see it in the finish because it's clear. It's a clear finish. You see the timber, so you'll see if someone's done a bad job in the prep work.
You mentioned earlier that around 20% of your work is new flooring. For those jobs, do you actually buy the timber material yourself?
If we are laying, yeah, it's depending on the client, the builder. The builder might source the timber, or it might be left up to us where we have our go-to suppliers. If they want to fish around for a cheaper price or a different kind of product, it's all theirs. As long as it's on site and at the right moisture content reading and the weather's good, we'll be there installing it.
That's a very key phrase that you just mentioned, moisture content. An architect that I used to work for when I was building full-time, he mentioned the importance of whenever you're installing new timber flooring into a new dwelling, it's important to get that timber there early on to adjust to the climate and the moisture content. How true is that?
It is very true. However,
because not a lot of people know that, do they?
No, not a lot of people do that. And you still see jobs go wrong if you acclimatise the timber. Timber's hard, it'll do what it wants to do, and it's so dependent on the weather. We can acclimatise the floor and it'll go down fine and it will be laid tight, and in two weeks you'll start seeing gaps appear. We have pretty erratic weather at the moment. Australia's, I think ever since, my dad puts it down to that June 2007 storm that we had. Ever since then, timber floors just don't, a lot of builders will know this, they just don't react how we think they're going to react. They're just all over the place. And clients
so you're referring to the common, I guess, theory of shrinking in winter in the cooler months and expanding in summer in the warmer months.
Well, yeah, humidity, so moisture in the air. If you get a few humid months, you'll see a floor expand. Or, in winter, if the sun's beating down on a particular area through a window, you'll get a bit of shrinkage, and you'll start to see gaps open up. And that's just timber. It's not, and that's what we love about timber. It just does what it wants to do. And that's just part of having a timber floor.
Well, it's a raw product, isn't it?
That's right.
So it's always going to be imperfect, and it's always going to have different characteristics. So is it important to get the timber there early on, like a couple of weeks?
That's what's suggested. So do it by the book.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. It gets delivered. It's supposed to be delivered by the supplier at 11%. No one's checking that.
Yeah.
No, the delivery guy isn't there with a moisture meter.
So 11% moisture content.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Matt. So with your line of business being an end product, being that money shot and a finishing trade, how do you manage the client expectations?
I think just that first meeting, asking what they expect and what they don't expect that's a really good question to ask, because everyone's different, and knowing what they don't like and do like is great, because I can then go, if they know something specific that they've researched online, even if it comes down to the feel of their floor under their feet, they don't want it to feel a particular way. I can give them the info that's needed. Color is a massive thing. They expect a color with a clear finish because they've seen it on the internet, It's just not how it works.
And this is so important because in the theme of this podcast where picture tells 1,000 words but it doesn't tell the full story, timber floors, like a lot of different finishes, can look fantastic on an Instagram photo or a website picture or anything in a brochure. What you said there is really important. The texture from the getting up in the morning, getting out of bed, putting on socks or walking in bare feet. It's all about other things besides the look of it, isn't it?
Exactly. You're living on it. It's not on the walls. It gets felt. You deal with it every day. So, we've had clients that get us back to refinish because they don't like the feeling of a matte floor because it's not polished enough. And that's fine. We'll come back and fix that up. But, everyone's different. Everyone has different expectations. But managing those expectations can be tricky. Definitely to do with colour. You can look up a photo of black butt floor and look at the colour and go, that's fantastic. Clear, yeah, I want a clear satin. But it may be from a different area that plantation is more than likely not the same plantation that's on your floor or you've ordered. So there might be different tones to the floor that you weren't expecting. And that's just something that you can't prepare the client for. All you got to say is every floor is different. It's a natural product. There's not a lot that we can do. Some people are after the money shot, the Instagram shot, and they're like, I want that exact shade of brown on my floor. I say, well, yeah, that's a spotted gum floor, but that's aged for a couple of months and it's got an oil on it. And you want a water-based. You don't want an oil. It's not going to look like that. And even if we put an oil down, it won't look like that for a couple of months. So they need to know that when they walk in, it won't stay that colour for long. I still struggle with client expectations. But most people are really good and they understand that it's a natural product. But this is the thing, it's not an engineered floor. It's not a laminate floor. It's not a tile where you just chuck it down and that's the colour. The timber can look different in different lights. Classic example of this, like environmental factors into it as well. We whitewashed a floor down in Fennel Bay, and in the kitchen it seemed weirdly orange, and I couldn't pick it either. And the client rang me up. This is after the final coat, so I drove back down to Fennel Bay, and sure enough, it was a little bit orange tinge in the floor. And I was like, oh, that's a bit funny. I don't know if it's been sanded. Like, nothing out of the ordinary is happening here. But they had Venetian blinds, and you can't really see out the kitchen window. But there's a brick house next door with orange brick, and the afternoon sun reflects off the brick next door and makes the room orange. Like, not the rest of the room, just the floor. Just picking up that glare off the brick. There's nothing that I can do about that. But yeah, they were understanding. They just hoped that the next door neighbour would one day paint.
Now, you mentioned before about water-based or oil-based finishes on flooring. To the people that are interested listening to this, what are the main differences between the two?
Polyurethane is pretty old school. Anyone has had their floors done before. It's the smelly stuff. It's it's really bad smell, very bad chemicals. It's a very durable finish though, and it's also pretty cheap. It's if you're on a budget, it's a way to go. Water-based finish is a lot more natural in colour, but it is a more natural finish, so it sits in the timber a little bit more. The polyurethane sits on top, so it's almost like a layer of plastic, but it does give you the most protection. But a water-based, we always try and push the water-based finishes, mainly because they're low VOCs, they don't smell very bad, they're not toxic.
What's VOCs, sorry?
Plainly, it's just chemical content.
Like a strong chemical compound that's in the material.
Yep.
Okay.
But that's the main difference between water-based and we call them solvent-based.
Yeah, so you like to use the water-based, which, like you said, goes into the actual surface of the timber, inundates itself inside the timber, as opposed to the oil-based, which is more just like a protective coating on top.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Now, how do you achieve balance between working life and home life?
I struggled with that when I first started, when I was working I went to full time at one point, and I took on an apprentice, and we were working full time, and I didn't really like it because I was leaving home at dark and getting home at dark, big days. And then Savannah fell pregnant, and I readjusted my priorities, and we downsized and went back to part-time just to look after her and just be there as part of it. I also have a strict no weekend policy. I don't take phone calls, and I don't work on weekends unless I have to. So that's a big unless.
Look, and I can see where that goes back to your family upbringing in a large family, and that importance of growing up in that family environment and the interaction and the kids playing in the big house, and being a part of that family value. So I can see that you've carried that into your own small family.
Definitely, I make a big point to be home well before dark so that I've got time to play basketball. Spencer's running around now, so that keeps me on my feet. And I just want to be there. So we've got another one on the way, and this is just a time period that I don't want to miss. So I've gotten a lot better. I do have a big issue with leaving work at the door, though. I'd really take it inside, and
it's an incredibly hard thing to not bring inside your family home. It's on your mind, whether you're chasing money or you've got outstanding quotes. It's not an easy thing to do, is it?
It's not, and because I run the business, I'm on the tools, I answer the phones, I do the quote. It's really difficult, and I don't advertise anymore. I haven't advertised for 2 years, and apart from social media. But
so most of your work is word of mouth referral.
Word of mouth referral or social media, usually Instagram. So I have thought about bringing Savannah on board, and she has asked in the past to come on board and help with the phones and admin side. But my dad wasn't like that with my mum. Mum was a mum, and I really liked that. And, some people may call it old-fashioned, but I just love Sav so much I don't want her to get involved in it and have to stress about it. And I don't mind stressing about it, and she looks after me. She's a huge support. She doesn't know what's going on, but she's a huge support.
You obviously have that, I guess, trust in your relationship where you take care of the business, and Savannah, your lovely wife, looks after the kids.
That's it.
And that's what works.
Yeah, that's what works. And I want to keep it that way. And, some people have asked about expanding the business, and at the moment I want to keep that family life for as long as I can until I have to. And we're in a good place now, so I don't feel the need to take on anyone else. I don't want to be inundated. I don't want to be thinking about it 24/7. And there was a point when we were working full time that's all I dreamt about. Didn't have a normal dream for quite a few months. I'd just dream about work, and I'd dream about jobs that didn't even exist. It was just always on my mind. I don't want to go back to that, not now anyway.
It was becoming that
burden having the business. And I do sometimes miss going 9 to 5, working for someone.
I think it's important to reflect, because sometimes you lose track of why you actually got into your particular business in the first place.
Definitely, 100% agree. And I think everyone has those moments in their life, but the positive always outweighs the negative, doesn't it? I have great flexibility, and I have a great little business. I don't need to take on more than what I can handle, just for myself anyway. Maybe one day in the future.
Well, I think also what you're trying to say, and it may not necessarily be conveyed in this slide, is that in order to control your quality of work and the type of finish, and to make sure that you have a satisfied client, you need to be able to control what you can control, and that is you can only take on so much work. So you're actually making a conscious choice to say, I'm happy doing this, I'm happy providing the level of service, I'm happy juggling this and balancing my home life as well, and I'm able to clearly separate the two. It's quite an achievement to be able to do that.
When I take on a client and contract is accepted, they're my client and they have my full attention. Whereas if I was running a bigger business, I would have a lower quality standard and I wouldn't be able to give my full to the client that I'm working with this week. So I think that's really important with my business being finishing trade. I like to be there with the client, as I was saying earlier. I like to be part of the project. I like them to be part of the project as well. Sometimes they do just nick off on a holiday and won't see them till they get back. But I really want them to be there and see the process and to enjoy the process because that gives them ultimate satisfaction, seeing that process, having their floors brought back to life if it's a refurb, or finishing off their house if it's a new build. And that means a lot to me. So I really like to give my 100% to the client that I'm currently working with.
I have a pretty good feeling what you're going to say to this question, but what are you most grateful for?
Definitely my family. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else.
All right, so what's your favourite part of the job?
Definitely the last coat. There's something about walking out of a hallway, it usually is. There's always really good light coming in on it. And you're at the front door and you do that last roll and it just flows. And you look at the reflection and it's all wet, of course. Maybe drying to a matte satin finish, but it's all glossy. And I don't do glossy floors anymore because that's not what the market wants. But when you see it glossy like that and wet, that's very cool. And then you know you've done a good job, because when it's glossy and wet like that, you can see the mistakes. And when you don't see any mistakes and you look down that hallway and there's no edge marks, no sanding marks, everything is just level, you go, yeah, that's it. And it's a good money shot, but it's not the end result. The end result is when it dries.
And just on that, what about trades, particularly on new homes, when trades come in after you? I bet that happens.
Yeah, I like to be the last trade. Just last week, I had to touch up.
You're meant to be the last trade.
I'm meant to be the last trade last week. Look, I seem to have a run-in with stonemasons at the moment. They like to spill. I don't know what they're spilling, but I've had a few little fry marks here and there in kitchens. I've got a bone to pick with them. But, you know, part of the job is making sure the client's looked after, and if we got to go and touch up, we'll touch up. We'll make sure it looks good if someone damages it. But really, ideally, we need to be the last trade just before paint touch up, pretty much at lock up, when it's ready to go, like the client's ready to move in. Because no one wants to scratch a floor before a client moves in. You're just going to see it.
Now, what about the age-old argument of before skirting boards or after skirting boards? Now, your reaction,
that's a good question.
Yeah, your reaction to that says it all, doesn't it? Because, yeah, it's just such a common problem, isn't it?
What we'd suggest is, if you are asking yourself that question in your build, get us to come round. We usually do it free of charge if it's not too big of a deal to get out to site. You just run around with an edger, get it flat, chuck your skirting boards down, paint, and then we'll come in and finish off. That means you get neat, flush skirting boards.
And I believe that's the way it's meant to be. And the reason that we're talking about this is, for those who don't know, is it's quite common that builders like to have single trades at the end of the job. So skirting boards will go on, therefore the painters paint all the walls, paint the skirts, and then in come the timber floor installers. And in some ways it's back to front, because in theory you should be putting the floorboards down first. You do your thing, then the painter has to then come back at the end, put the skirting board on, and then paint it. And that's where the tension comes in between before skirting boards or after skirting boards, because it's obviously easier to put the skirting on first.
That's right. A lot of people get freaked out that we're going to damage their skirting, but we've got a good setup. Like, we know how to use the machines, the edges in particular. That's my job, because that's, if you're going to mess up a floor sanding job, that's what you're going to mess up on. And I'm really particular about my edges, and the machine's set up so that your skirtings aren't touched. And man, I've seen some shockers, a few sanders before me, if it's a refurb and the floors have been polished in the past, and you'll have like a 2-3 mil gouge out of each of the bottom of the skirting boards, and people have some pretty rough times with floor sanders. I come into a new refurb and they go, are you going to chew out all the skirting boards? What about my kitchen? Is there going to be dust everywhere? It's like, no, that's the old days. This is something different.
Yeah, you have dust extractors now.
Yeah, big dust extractors.
Now, what would you say to young people that are coming through or contemplating a move into timber floorboards?
Do it.
It's very niche, isn't it?
It is niche, and there's not enough guys to do it. And there are guys looking for apprentices, good, hardworking apprentices. It's hard to find a good apprentice that's consistent and wants to work hard, because it's not an easy job. It's you can have some real rough days, and there's nothing worse than sitting down on a 100-year-old floor on your hands and knees, punching nails and filling. It's tough on your body, and the days can be long and strenuous. But if you put in the time and the effort to do your apprenticeship, and you come out on the other side and you have the ability, the resources to go out on your own, you can earn some coin. And that goes for every trade, doesn't it? I think if you put in and pay your dues, you can earn some good coin, and it can be really beneficial in the long run, having a trade up your sleeve for sure.
All right, Matt. Well, you mentioned earlier about marketing. Now, I have to say there's an incredible looking hat here, and I love what you've done to it. It suits you. It says a lot about you. So it's a hat, and we'll put it up on our Instagram page, but it's got, a bit of timber on the front of it. Can you explain that to our listeners, please?
Yeah, the timber is a European oak, and it's been stained with an impact oil. When I started doing all of our apparel and hats, I used some European oak that was left over from a job and cut these logo shape sizes and stamped them with a branding iron. And
which is the Three Brothers
which
logo.
Is the logo. And coated them in, every logo is a different colour of an impact oil. And it's a shame because there's not a need for impact oil much in Newcastle, which I love. I think it's fantastic. Like every logo is one on my shirt. Everyone's different, and I think it's pretty cool. And they've stuck around the test of time, so glue on the back's holding up.
I think it's
DIY magic.
I think it's amazing. It's it obviously says a lot about you and your particular craft. So I think that's really important for anyone listening to this. If you're in a particular trade or business, making sure that your marketing speaks volumes for your particular craft. So very well done. All right, Matt. So I've seen some of your work online and also in person. Now, the project in Meriwether, can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is a job that we've just completed a couple of weeks ago for a development company, and they have refurbished the Lord Mayor back in 1910. Lord Mayor of Newcastle built it. It's quite a property. It's beautiful, and together with Sage Painting, we're involved as well, have just transformed this place. It is absolutely beautiful, and once it's completed fully, it's going to just breathe new life into this property. So as I said, it's 1910 build, and the floors were in really bad shape. We had to do quite a few repairs. So the flooring in it was Kauri pine, and Kauri pine, for those that don't know, have a lot of borer in it. So borer is the little bugs that eat the little trails through it, and that affects the integrity of some of the boards. So pretty sure it was originally polished, and then once upon a time it got carpeted, and the carpet's come up, and there's a few boards that have been damaged. So we've gone through and pulled up some of the flooring from the bedrooms that are going to be carpeted, and we've replaced those boards so that they're ready to go for another 100 plus years. And what we've done is we've stained it a really dark chocolate brown, and it looks fantastic. It's something else, and that's why I do this job. This is why I love being in Newcastle and working on these houses, because that house has got history, and it's going to have history for another 100 years. These kinds of floors the stories that they tell, who knows who has been in that house. We won't know. Sure, someone could tell us a brief history of the house and what kind of parties were held on those dining room floors. But it just tells a story, and it's going to keep telling a story for a very long time.
I can really tell just by looking at your eyes lighting up then that that's really what gives you a kick, where you're actually really interested in not only a history of what's going on with the floor, but you're actually interested in or thinking about the people in future who will be either walking or living on the floor.
Definitely. And floors, as I said, they tell a story. The wear in them really tells a story as well. We've done a few houses out at places, particularly out at Dungog, some really sweet farmhouses, big mansions that once upon a time belonged to someone incredible. And the wear in the timber, particularly thresholds like door thresholds, and the wear in them, big slabs of timber and stairs. These slabs of timbers, they've got these wear marks that can be like 10, 15 mil deep, just of feet just wearing through it through time. And we were able to work on a job about a month ago up at Dungog, and these stairs had these wear marks, and they wanted to keep them. I'm really happy that they did, because it just tells so many stories, and it's really cool history.
Do you install engineered flooring as well, or is it mainly just timber?
I just deal with solid timber because I love it, and I think I stand for the product and what it's used for. I don't want to deliver a product that's going to last 10 to 15 years and be thrown out because it's not salvageable anymore. These engineered floors have got a veneer. So once you wear through that veneer or you sand it, it can be sanded once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
But after that, you're down at the ply base. So it's got to be chucked out. And I don't like that. I like solid timber flooring. I stand for that.
Well, Matt, thanks for coming on to this week's episode of Build Hatch and sharing your story. If people listening to this want to get into contact with you, what's the best way to go about it?
Best would be to visit the website and fill out a submission form. That's probably the best way to reach me. Or you can send me a message on Instagram. You can check us out at Instagram.
And we'll put some shots up on Instagram following this, and I encourage everyone to check it out. And once again, thanks for coming on to Build Hatch.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was a warm conversation with Matt McRae. Once again, getting around and talking to the wonderful people in the building construction industry, it's always a nice reminder to hear how people are valuing time with their families by putting family time over work time. Well done to you, Matt. Once again, if you'd like to be featured on Build Hatch, feel free to reach out via Instagram or email. We have some exciting guests coming onto the show over the next few weeks, so stay tuned for those ones. Have a great week, and you'll hear me on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.